Hi, my name is Gad Salner. I'm from Israel. I'm a group manager at a fintech startup company called Melio. And today we're going to talk about scaling engineering teams and how we scaled from 1 to 40 engineers and what we did to achieve that. But usually when I come into a room full of people, I'm behaving very nicely. I introduce myself. And I said, hi, my name is Gad. And then people in the US probably thinking this is his real name. Yes, my name is Gad. So we don't have time to introduce everyone. So what we're going to do, and believe me, it's more awkward for me than for you. So I'm going to count to 3, and maybe you can all just say your names out loud. Maybe I'll catch up a few names. Okay, believe me, it's more embarrassing for me, but let's give it a try. So on the count to 3, just say your name out loud. 1, 2, 3. Hi, Paul. Nice to meet you. So today we're going to talk about engineering teams and how we're going to scale them. And how we're going to do it with the right vision, asking ourselves the right questions, researching it, planning, analyzing the gaps between where we are and where we want to be, and then searching for the right tools, and even more importantly, creating the right tools to achieve that. So I'm Gad Salner, from Israel, 38 years old, father of 2. In the past 20 years, I've been in the Israeli tech scene, and in the past 2 weeks, I've been in the artificial intelligence generated arts. It's going to be throughout the entire presentation, so bear with me. What I did in the past 20 years is being a manager, engineer, manager, until the last 2 startups that I worked in. One is very small, as WeWork, where I was one of the first engineers, and the other one is Melio, where I'm currently a group manager. And another project that I'm running called Kaduragel Shefel, which is a documentary project celebrating Israel's diverse cultures through amateur soccer. For example, these photos are from the Israeli desert and the Sea of Galilee. And this one is one of my favorite photos. And these exhibitions and videos will be presented around the world. And I'm very proud of this project because it gave me a lot of tools as a manager to communicate, to plan, and it also led me to the understanding that dream big and plan accordingly. And this is something that I used immensely throughout my tech career. And this number that you see now on the screen is, according to Why Decision Failed book, is the increased chance of having your project successful if you plan and find more alternatives other than 2. And where we started as a company, and we're going to talk about it in a few moments, we had a lot of challenges, and let me visualize it for you with a friend of mine, which is Dima. This is Dima. This was the first engineer that I worked with in Melio, and I wish he was with us today. I mean, he's alive, sorry. Dima is very much alive, don't get me wrong, sorry, Dima. I talked to him yesterday, but basically we're going to talk about the several phases that we had in Melio. The first one, when I started at April 2020, as you all can recall, it was not a very good day to start a new job. Beginning of the apocalypse, as I remember it. And the second phase is when we started to assess damage assessment and understand and started to hire people. And then another phase, wow, that's a lot of Dimas on screen, I see, okay. And the third phase is when we scaled up to 40 and going forward what we planned accordingly. So let's talk about day 1 when I started, and I signed up for this startup company a couple of months before everything closed in. And the first period, 2 months that I didn't see anyone, just made me realize that how people matter. This is something that as a manager, I always have been a people manager. But when you started to understand that basically when you work remote and there is no office, then there isn't any difference between the large companies with the brand new offices and cool PlayStation rooms and pools and everything. And basically when you strip that down, you just have and need to rely on people, because that's the biggest resource that any I can say company, but any group of people and any like project has. It's the people, and this helped me realize, and going forward, this is something that led me to the understanding that we need to double down on that on any aspect of the choices that we need to do. So after a couple of months, we met for the first time, and we started to hire a few people, some of my good friends and colleagues from past works. And we stopped it was the first time that we stopped and met together, and we started to plan ahead. This is the first time that we started to think of, in a very abstract and high-level way, what is a team? What makes a good team win? What does make a good company a winning company? And we didn't want just to think of like patch things up, and we didn't want just to fix the flow. We started to think of a more holistic approach because we understood that we have a chance to create something big. This company was planned to scale very quickly. We knew that we were going to hire many people in the upcoming months. We didn't know how much, but we didn't know that we are starting to create a culture. So we stopped, and this was the first time, and you'll see that it's going to repeat itself. This was the first time, actually, that we stopped and asked ourselves several questions. So the first question was, okay, so the first domain is a team, right? What does make a good team a winning team? Like, how do you take a bunch of individuals and with different motivations, different aspirations, different anything, because all people are different, but how do you make them to one cohesive communicating team? And the second domain was delivery. I mean, once you have a good communicating, cohesive people working together, how do you make sure that you have the right processes to make them deliver the best way? And once you have a good team delivering well, how do you keep a growth mindset and making sure that it's still working together? So we started to break down into different parameters for each. For example, for team, we started to think of, okay, so team needs to be cohesive, communication, every single person in the team should feel that it has an impact, should be feeling engaged in what he's doing. And the second part is delivery. How do we make sure that everything is transparent, the work we're having a good velocity? And the third part is growth. How do you keep a growth mindset? How do you make sure that people are still growing together? They want to stay in the company. They want to make sure that the team is even more cohesive once you deliver something. And we started to think about it as a feed-forward cycle, that each and every step is relying on the step before. Like, we meant a very holistic approach, that we didn't want only to double down on delivery and forgetting about the people. We didn't want to double down on people and forget about their growth mindset. So we started to think about it as a feed-forward cycle, and this is something that we kept in mind throughout our phases in the company. Like, any phase had their own feed-forward cycle. And later on these domains and parameters, we started to do a SWOT analysis, and for those who don't know what it is, it's strengths, mapping the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats of the current situation. Again, based on the feed-forward cycle that I just mentioned. And for example, our SWOT analysis was actually very same, I guess, for many companies at the same stage during remote and during Corona, which is, the strength was, okay, we were a good bunch of people. It was a good company with great opportunities. The weaknesses was, again, on one hand, we have a good small team, but a small team means that if one of us is not feeling motivated or one of us is leaving, then we have a problem because we're very small. And again, the opportunities was that we're going to hire a lot of people, the company is growing, and the threats were hypergrowth. This is something that is threatening each and every organization. I mean, how do you make sure that the 10th or 15th person feels at home like the first people or the second person? And how do you communicate well? And the most frightening threat was, of course, the pandemic, because everyone was feeling alone, everyone has its own concerns in his personal life. How do you keep communicating through remote, because we weren't used to it? And we created action items specific based on the SWOT analysis and on the feed-forward cycle and its parameters. which are again team and delivery and growth. And basically I have an entire talk about working in remote and how we figured it out. But just a few examples. For example, for team, we worked on remote, yes, but we did 2 syncs a day, 2 sync meetings a day. The second meeting was with different random person in the company to get to meet each other. When we got a chance, we did our one-on-one meetings at parks. We created and doubled down on communication channels to make sure everyone not left behind. Regarding delivery, each feature we made a strict rule that each feature has to work with 2 engineers, one more senior, one less senior, to make sure that no one is working alone and everyone is learning from each other. The senior one is learning how to mentor others, and the junior, less senior, is learning from the senior. We had a very strict checklist of dev cycle, that's to make sure that in the office, of course, you can turn around and ask your colleague about, oh, did I forget something? But when you're at home, you're not. And regarding growth, and again, this is just small examples, but the important thing is the holistic approach that we thought of. We didn't miss any detail. We signed everyone up for different resources to read. We shared what we learned. We had like live demos online, which was much easier than the demos that we have nowadays when everyone's back in the office. And it worked well. It worked perfectly well because we still grew. We had like a good cohesive team that delivered well, and the company really enjoyed it because we grew, and both in number of people and also in the value of the company and its products. So a year passed and we were almost 20 people, and no more COVID restrictions. And now at that point, we started to think again, okay, we're 20 people, now what? What we're going to be in 6 months from now? Where we're going to be a year from now? We're going to be 50, that's people. We're going to double ourselves. So again, we paused for a second because we wanted to understand what is going to be like on different aspects of our engineering domains, both technical and cultural aspects, when we are 50 people. How is going to be the onboarding process when we're 30? How is going to be the dev experience when we are 30 people? Because it's a completely different challenges that we need to face, and we need to address them now. So what we did is we started to, you're late, Dima. What we did is we started to map the entire engineering domains that matter to us, that were a challenge for us. Most of you will probably see it and say, yeah, that's our same challenges. But as you can see, some of them are more technical, like testing and monitoring, and some of them are some of them are more cultural aspects, like onboarding, engagement, knowledge sharing, and growth. And we thought of it like on several axes. And for example, what if our company looked like this? What if our testing was very good, our onboarding was great, but our dev experience wasn't that good? What if our velocity was great, but our engineering engagement was bad and our onboarding was even worse? What does it mean that now new people come and they'll have like a very bad onboarding experience, they'll take time to ramp up? So we try to think of several approaches that will help us on board and make sure that the next 30, 40 people will join the company in a great way. So one approach is the stale. I mean, we all have our own a very busy CTO that has something that he needs to deliver, and product managers that are very, very pushy. So one approach is do nothing. I mean, we have enough work. What will happen then is all of our engineering domains will get even worse. People will probably leave because people crave for engineering challenges. People crave for growth opportunities. So of course, this is something that we didn't even think about. Another approach is top-down. I mean, we as managers, we can define, we know, of course, we know what's best for everyone. We will tell people what testing should be like. We'll tell people how onboarding should be like. But we passed on that as well because we understood that if we get this approach, first of all, we as managers, we don't have the capacity to think about all the details. We want to reach in all these engineering domains, right? Because we always think of a very holistic approach, a very detailed approach, a very high resolution approach, and we want to do it across all domains because we understood that a year from now, when we are 50 people, we need everything to be as best as we can. And another thing that about top-down approach is we're losing the accountability and we don't have the buy-in of the engineers. Because the engineers say, okay, they decided for me how testing should be, so I just need to deliver what they tell me, and okay, so I'll start to look maybe for another place and I can make an impact. Another approach is a domain-specific approach. I mean, we don't have time for everything. We need to make sure our testing is better, so let's make sure we have testing great. And what we chose to do is engineering-led approach, which means that we'll give the engineers themselves the opportunity to lead every aspect of what they're interested about, and we'll pair them with managers. And we called it the group framework game plan, and the steps are as follows, and I'm going to run through it. Again, first of all, we need to analyze where we want to be and where are we now in the gaps between. And we found out these are the domains that we wanted to double down on. The next step was to assign it to people. And now this was the part that I was very afraid of. We made like one-pagers with current status, problem statement, and goals for each and every one of these domains, and we actually printed them and gave them to the engineers. And I was afraid that engineers are very cynical, and they say, okay, what's that? I don't know if I can use that word, so I won't. And we handed out to them, and we found out that they were very excited because suddenly they had chance to make impact in domains that they didn't even know that they can lead. Some people are more cultural, interested in culture, so suddenly they have an opportunity. Some people are very into testing. So we started to pair them up with different managers, not their own, but managers from different teams, just to make sure that they are even more cohesive as a group. And then we send them out to research in what they do in the company. We made it, and we make it mandatory for them to reach out to different companies because networking is very important and you don't have this skill on the day-to-day basis. And we ask them to study. We ask them to buy books. We ask them to sign up for courses, and they did. And for each and every one of these task forces, we ask them to make a plan. Like, what's the North Star? What's the timeline? What's the OKRs that we're going to measure it on? And probably you need resources, right? You need time, you need maybe money to sign up for courses or different tools. And suddenly different engineers have the chance to plan, to have a holistic plan and think thoroughly about what they're passionate about. And once they did all that, we asked them to share with the entire group. And suddenly people from that double down on testing share their learnings with the entire group. And the task force of the onboarding shared their learnings with the entire group. And everyone learned from the different experiences of different task forces. And then you need to deliver, right? You need to have the OKRs, you have the timeline, so you can be measured on, and you need to double down on that. And this way, we made sure that the entire group is growing, with the engineers growing as well. This led to a very good situation that suddenly, when we were 40 engineers, as we are today, we had the privilege to think forward again, because we had a very good group. People started to join because they knew it's a good growth opportunity and a good company to join. And then we started to map again what we're going to be when we're 80 engineers. So again, we started to analyze the situation, and we understood that task forces are working very well, but they don't communicate well with each other. We're not fully optimized with having the different outputs and inputs of different task forces that can impact different task forces. And what do I mean by that? For example, let's take testing. Testing influences different aspects and different engineering domains. It influences the onboarding, because if we want the testing culture to be very good, we need to be as part of the onboarding. And if we want people to test and do it with like joy, and the dev experience should be affected, and maybe the dev cycle should be adapted as well. But testing is also influenced by different task forces. For example, monitoring. So what we did is we thought of ways to address that, and the two ways we thought is one, the tech leadership framework. Like we had started to have tech leads for each team. We should utilize them. We should make sure that they work as a team. We have 4 tech leads, 1 principal engineer, and they should work as a team. They have their own KPIs, they should have their own communication channels, and they should work together, because this is the way you can spread the knowledge and make sure everyone learns and everyone is sharing the data. And the second one is data-driven task forces. Let's take testing, for example. Testing is influenced by different domains. For example, testing is based on the code base itself, on the sanity tests, on different research and incidents. And the output of the testing is, as I mentioned before, we should make impact on onboarding, on dev cycle, on developer experience. And the way we're going to do that is by the tech leadership framework. And if you see that nice animation, is all these different task forces are impacting everyone. It's impacting different task forces and different aspects of engineering. And once we make sure that the tech leadership and the tech leaders are communicating and being ambassadors for each and every one of these task forces, we can make sure that their knowledge of each task force is being passed throughout any one of the squads, because we're not 10 engineers anymore, we're not 15, we're 50, we're going to be 80. And we'll only now, from now, we're starting to think forward. And basically, what's next? What's next, we don't know yet, because we're currently 40 engineers. Again, we're aiming for the next 40. But what I'm sure, and this is something that this is an advice I can give you. It doesn't matter if it's your pet project, your culture project, your team. It doesn't matter if you're an engineer now or manager now, or you're thinking about your next career path. It's dream big and plan accordingly. Like every time you face a new challenge, or any time you think of a new project that you're going to step into, pause for a minute, analyze the situation, have a vision, have a good vision, map the gaps between where you are and where you want to be, and find the right tools to act upon it. So thank you very much, everyone. And it's been a pleasure to be in Boston and this conference. Thank you.